Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Patti's People, sponsored by the Evidence Base. I'm Dr. Patti Peeples, and I'm pleased to welcome my guest today, Dr. Dalia Dawoud. Dalia is a research principal that specializes in health technology assessment, policy, and strategy, with a focus on artificial intelligence and evidence generation. She has contributed to ISPOR's AI working group and co-developed ELEVATE-GenAI, as well as the taxonomy of generative AI. Her work is focused on opportunities for integrating AI into HTA while maintaining rigor, transparency, and trust. Welcome, Dalia.
Thank you so much, Patti, and thanks for the kind invitation.
I'm delighted to have an opportunity to speak with you. And we're going to really dig down into the work that you've done with the ISPOR working group, as well as we're seeking really refined advice on what the status is of HTA agencies, their use, their concerns, their approach to AI, and how our industry should be responding to this. So AI is forcing a fundamental question in healthcare today, not just how we improve evidence generation, but in fact, whether the system is built to evaluate evidence, is it fit for purpose? And we're going to dig into this today with a conversation. And with respect to AI, other than the speed itself, can you tell me what feels fundamentally different about this moment and what is driving this acceleration of AI usage in HTA?
Yeah, well, primarily the scale of the change that we are seeing and the ability of AI to work with massive amounts of data to bring us insights that we haven't seen or were able to get before without that powerful tool that we have just been exposed to. So to be honest, it's a real fundamental change, as you are saying, and it's probably going to be revolutionary for some applications more than others, but definitely it will have its impact and its stamp on HTA practice. In terms of methods and processes, definitely it will be, we are seeing it as a change maker in this regard.
Mm-hmm. You said more helpful in some applications than the others. What are two applications that are really suited, fit for purpose for AI, and what are one or two that we're not anywhere near?
Okay, so let's focus on generative AI. So generative AI has shown promise and is now almost common practice to use in the areas of evidence generation, conducting systematic reviews and evidence synthesis. And this application perhaps is the most mature of other applications, but also in terms of using it to summarize documents and to prepare first drafts, let's say, of documents as well and reports. For example, even evidence submissions to HTA and regulatory agencies could be a good application for it. But we are awaiting kind of the first attempts to use AI in this context, so that we can judge on its value and reliability, and definitely whether it is accepted by HTA and regulatory agencies.
Are you familiar with what situation will be the first attempt to use that, and in what HTA body?
We have seen that there is, in terms of the movement within HTA bodies and the acceptance of using AI in evidence generation, we could see that there is a spectrum, if you like. So some HTA agencies haven't been forthcoming about what is their position, and so it's unlikely that they will be receiving submissions in the near future that uses AI in evidence generation. But others that were more, let's say, the early movers in that space and produced the guidance, or not guidance specifically, but at least best practice principles for using AI in evidence generation are likely to receive these types of submissions. So I'd mention here NICE in the UK and CDA-AMC in Canada, given that they have put a more clear, like, best practice principle or position statements for their acceptance or their willingness to engage in discussion about the use of AI in evidence generation. And again, I'm talking generative AI specifically, but also machine learning also is being discussed. Although these discussions have started even earlier than talking about generative AI in these evidence submissions.
Given that you've named a couple of HTA agencies that have issued guidance and documentation, where would you fall on this statement? HTA bodies are actually reacting in real time to AI and are not leading. True, false,
Well,
sort of true?
personally, I feel that they are closer to being reactive than leading. We know, as I just mentioned, that some have managed to articulate their positions, like NICE and CDA, AMC, but we are yet to hear from other organizations, including key leading HTA bodies. So it's gonna take a submission to require that position, and I feel that will be reacting rather than leading. It's good to see it being mentioned by organizations such as, for example, Health Technology Assessment International, of course, in the Global Policy Forum, where they have outlined the position of the different HTA agencies in relation to the use of AI. So there is movement. There's certainly movement, and we can see that they are responding, but it looks like more reactive than leading, really.
What's the excuse for not having a policy at this point? I mean, it seems like it could theoretically be considered an abandonment of responsibility by the HTA agency if they haven't made any statement with respect to it.
I think many might not feel comfortable yet to reach that position of giving authoritative guidance about the use of AI in this context, merely because they haven't started using it internally, for example, due to resources or ability to engage and having the expertise internally to be able to develop such like position statements or guidance to manufacturers, or potentially also some might be concerned about the reaction of the public, for example, because we're yet to see a positive response to AI use without concerns attached to it.
Yeah.
So some might really be concerned about the public's their own kind of populations or target populations perceptions about the use of AI.
Yeah. Is there any example where AI has been used for an HTA coverage policy decision?
There seem to be early attempts. We haven't heard so much about that from HTA agencies themselves, but we can see it in conferences and abstracts that being submitted and presentations given, that companies have started actually getting in touch with HTA agencies about potential or even real submissions, real life submission that can include AI. I don't have exact examples to give you at the moment, but certainly there is that, especially that we can see and presented in conferences.
I've heard you mention that that the evidence generation, the way that we evaluate evidence, that we may not be fit for purpose for AI. Talk a little bit more about that. Is this a structural thing? Is this something that can be overcome with additional testing and refinement of AI? or do we have to go back with the baby and the bathwater, so to speak, of evidence? Do we have to reform the evidence?
At this stage, I think it's more about considering which applications in the evidence generation life cycle is suitable for our knowledge of AI and how it can be used, and the potential shortcomings or challenges that come with its use. In the future, it's likely that we will be able to revamp how we do HTA and redesign the whole process to make the best use of the capabilities of AI. It's like a situation of building the plane as we fly it, if you like, because we are learning as we go, and it's only by being exposed to these situations that we will be able to ensure that when we approach the whole redesign or revamping of the process itself, that we are doing the right thing. But it's certainly not only about what is possible within the current framework of doing HTA. It's really going to reshape how we think about the whole process and how we do, whether it's HTA doers or users, and how they are interacting with the evidence.
Mhm. Are there any signals from a structural standpoint of how you might suggest redefining the HTA structural process? Anything that says, early on, this is clearly an issue that we need to work on from an HTA design process?
I would say there are some early signals of how the process can be redesigned, and for example, it would have been impossible to work with living evidence, whether it is living systematic reviews or economic modeling. But this is becoming more and more the talk of the town, if you like, that the use of AI is going to make this feasible and possible to see in real life. And that would be quite a shift and a change in how HTA is done. Usually we have it at a certain point in time and it's done once, potentially could be reviewed, but the ability to have proper life cycle HTA and living HTA is much more real because of the use of AI, or it is going to be much more real because of the availability of such a powerful tool.
Mhm. Do you think that it's possible that we are slowing the adoption of AI by demanding too much certainty too early?
Some would say yes to that. I personally feel that we are taking more time than we should, if you like. Whether this is because we need to be more certain and to validate the use of AI, or it's because what I've mentioned earlier of the public perception and the fear about the potential for bias and of getting things wrong, and waiting to be much more confident about its use. So I'm more towards the fact that we are delaying a bit, and by not having the clarity about acceptance of AI in evidence generation. And that's primarily because, as you said, we HTA agencies probably and regulators like to have a little bit more certainty about the value, the added value of using AI compared to the current methods. Let's not forget that there is a huge learning curve for these agencies to start accepting AI in evidence generation, because of the fact that they need to upskill and to have the ability internally to be able to work with this type of evidence.
Bias and decision risk, of course, exist in traditional evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Are these deeper risks associated with AI? Is it a concern of the scale of error rather than the actual presence of error? Where's the rub? Where's the major concern?
It's certainly about the scale of the error that could happen if you are relying on AI, and that's why all regulators and HTA agencies, the first thing that they have signaled is that it shouldn't be automation, it should be augmentation, and that there should be that element of human in the loop. So the importance of ensuring that we still have these guardrails and these checks in place is very important. And I imagine it's going to be even more important the more if we are using it for applications that has real impact on the decision making, things like estimating relative treatment effects, for example. And if we are going to go anyway near the using the actual decision making process, because let's not forget that there are potential for its use also in that stage, and that would make it even more important to be clear about the risks and the potential for bias. And also there are other risks related to privacy and confidentiality, and this is all these are all real challenges that we are battling with at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Is it possible that at the most extreme that AI could threaten the relevance of HTA? And if so, when do you think that conversation is going to happen? 5 years, 3 years, 10?
That's a difficult question. I would hope not, that it will not be a threat to the relevance of HTA, and that's only possible if HTA is reformed in the right way to make the best use of AI, and to really develop with the technology and its application and its use, to ensure that we are safeguarding against that potential for losing relevance. I don't think this is likely to happen in the near future. Hopefully not ever. But I see that we are, as a workforce in that discipline, we are able to adapt to these new technological advances and to evolve with it, and maybe taking time, but I think it's moving in the right direction.
The impact on human training and knowledge obviously is a significant concern. In the HEOR arena, AI could potentially cause de-skilling and job displacement. Where do you think that AI disruption might actually hit first in HTA and in our arena of HEOR?
I'd say in areas where there is limited creativity and it's more about repetitive tasks and working tasks that are daunting and take a lot of time, but with limited scope for creativity. So these are areas that are going to be most suitable for AI to really be the main player compared to the human elements. But in other areas where creativity and critical thinking and ability to make informed judgments, these are areas that are unlikely to be overtaken by AI in the near future, or as we currently see it.
Can you be specific about task, roles, and functions that would be most at risk within a pharmaceutical company or a consulting agency?
Areas that we have seen is being and I wouldn't say that the functions themselves at risk, but at least reducing either the sizes of these functions that are organized around these types of repetitive or daunting tasks, that for things like report writing and collating documents and summarizing documents. these are areas maybe that will be most subject to changing in how they are organized and how they are functioning, things or functions like medical writing, perhaps, in is at the helm of these, because of the different way that we are dealing with how we start, how we develop manuscripts and abstracts and.
And what would be the first visible shift that you would see inside an organization?
In a positive way, I'd say that the ability to be more visionary and think creatively will be the clarity, the clear signal that AI is being used correctly or in the appropriate way. So the ability, the time shifting of timelines as well, being able to be more efficient in working and developing or completing the tasks that have used to take more time than it really should be with the help of AI. So perhaps being able to offer also new services based on the use of AI and the ability to automate a number of tasks that say things like searching literature, searching previous or gaining insights from previous HTA submissions, and informing the ability to work around the previous shortcomings or challenges of these tasks.
What do you think that what new roles specifically do you think would be introduced if there was a movement from those rote and repetitive tasks? And if you can, give me a sense of what that role would be doing, not just in the way of something more creative or strategic, but something a little more specific, like there will be fewer medical writers and more of these kinds of people.
Certainly, we're seeing data scientists and AI specialists that are being recruited to lead on the the AI strategy within an organization. So the first, on the strategic level, you'll definitely require a strategic role to oversee the development of the AI strategy and its application within the organizations, be it consultancy or pharma company or even HTA agencies for this matter. But also in terms of the hands-on, it's those with the expertise in using AI in specific tasks. Additionally, definitely the data scientists that are able to work with these tools and even improve on the tool and its performance in a specific or purpose-specific tasks.
Do you see those data scientists as being separate from the typical HEOR training academic route? Or do you see PhD HEOR programs including data science in a greater way in the academic track? I mean, where are these people going to come from, and do they even need to have HEOR specialized knowledge, or are they purely data scientists that work across the spectrum?
At the starting stages, probably there will be data scientists coming to the discipline of HEOR and HTA. But as we progress and we adapt our training programs and educational programs in this area, definitely AI will become more embedded and as standard, if you like, modules to be taken, and this will provide that this workforce that has both expertise. But definitely this will depend on the stage we are in terms of getting better knowledge in this field.
previously you noted that systematic literature reviews are considered a fairly safe use case for AI and HTA. Let's operationalize that. What makes that safe enough?
So the key thing, and then we have to be specific about say a safe use. It's really still as implemented with human in the loop, as we say, on the principle of augmentation. But I would say what makes an application safe is the availability of evidence and validation studies that confirm that its use is that the use of AI has an added value not only in terms of efficiency, but even improving on the performance of previously of human performance itself, so that the model of augmented review is delivering both efficiency gains, but also less need for quality assurance. So it has to be there has to be validation studies to support that this use is really delivering value.
So the ability to be able to ask the question, is this valid, is the first criteria. If there's no way to assess the validation of the augmented AI, then it's a hands-off area.
Exactly.
So what would be the next currently unsafe area that will become acceptable?
It's the safety here. I'm judging the safety by the availability of evidence on the validity of that particular use case, or on the value of that particular use case. So we still are missing the fact that missing the then full peer-reviewed publications about the validity of using AI in multiple stages in the evidence generation life cycle and the drug development process in overall. So I would single out, for example, the need for more evidence to support the use of AI or Gen AI specifically in applications such as developing economic models. We have seen multiple attempts on the different stages of that, but there is still potential for ensuring that we are not just using it to automate tasks, but really to improve how we develop these economic models to be valid, to have face validity, to have proper structure, uncertainty assessment. So there is more need. I wouldn't say it's unsafe at the moment, to be honest. There are the evidence on its use in certain stages of the economic modeling process, but there's scope for much more there.
What stages of the economic model do you feel that there's notable evidence that it's acceptable?
I've seen in conceptualization, so developing conceptual model, summarizing the economic evidence that is to use it for conceptualization or for developing economic models, on sourcing some of the parameter inputs that are required for the economic model with varying levels of accuracy, but also validation of economic models that have been built by human or the health economist. The AI can be used to validate these economic models and QA it to ensure its robustness. For example, also the report writing, for sure, the writing model reports as well has been tested. Replicating published economic models is another use case that's supported by evidence. And let's be clear about what evidence I mean here. So we have multiple conference abstracts, for example. You will find that AI was top perhaps in the number of abstracts in some of the latest conferences like ESPOR Europe, but the translation of these abstracts into published full peer-reviewed publications hasn't been at the same rate. So we really need to see the translation of these kind of just abstract to peer-reviewed publication that could be used to support the use of AI in these specific use cases.
So the parameters that we use for determining something is valid or not, can those same validation processes transfer to AI validation? Or are we having to develop new methods of validation and new parameters of whether something would be considered highly valid, not valid?
I would say both. So the current metrics that we are using to validate tools and to ensure that they are accurate and reproducible would be also, and we also will need some application specific or AI specific measures of performance that we will definitely borrow from the disciplines, other disciplines that are using AI or developing AI.
Mhm. Let's talk a little bit about the use of AI with unstructured data. Certainly translating or transforming, even a better word, unstructured data into usable variables is quite a promising area. What level of accuracy is good enough for an HTA in this? Have they even talked about this? What's the process for seeing this implemented in a fashion within the HTA body?
So at the moment, it's more about the evidence development stages to transform unstructured data that are available in electronic health records, for example, into variables that could be used in data analysis. There was mixed evidence around the accuracy of using these types of GenAI or large language models to do that. It's improving with the newer versions and also with the domain specific tools and models that are being used. But it certainly opens a gold mine, if you like, to be able to accurately transform this type of data that was previously impossible to kind of transform at the appropriate speed and that would be requested or required for generating evidence or generating real world evidence. At the moment, there's a spectrum of performance in that space, but it's more and more it's improving, and more use cases are coming and being published in this area specifically.
Do you think this is improving our real world evidence? Is it complicating it? Is it both and or what is it?
It's enriching it for sure to be able to see really have that insight into the large corpus of data that we have, especially in the healthcare systems worldwide. That would be very enriching and improving to RWE. But it's important to ensure that we are doing this within the guardrails and the best practice principles that we have, both with working with real world evidence, but also working with AI specifically. So I would say that it is improving RWE to be able to generate these insights, but it's important to be careful about the challenges and the risks that can exist. For example, using biased data to rely on in terms of training these large language models. But also biased data in terms or reinforcing bias and inequalities that are already inherent in access to healthcare and the availability of this type of data.
So if various organizations have their own trained large language model, and two organizations take the same research question with the same data sets, it's possible that they could come up with quite different answers on an analysis because the way that they've trained that large language model differs. Which one's right? How do we resolve that? If every organization out there is creating their own agentic AI and their own large language model, which one's right? Is there a right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. It makes sense, and it's one of the barriers to using AI is the fact that there's no reproducibility. Even if you use your own the same data you are working on, you use different prompts to interrogate it, then you will probably get different answers. I'm not a data scientist myself, and I'm not sure how best to address this, but also this problem alongside the problem of hallucination are key problems that we really need to address in order to be able to trust AI. Some say that fine-tuning and prompt engineering can help ensure that you are getting reproducible answers, but I'm yet to see that real improvement in this area, if you like.
Dalia, in your previous role at NICE, you were involved in the HTA lab. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what were you actually testing inside the HTA lab?
Yeah, sure. So the HTA lab was established as a sandbox environment for NICE to experiment and develop complex solutions to complex problems like new challenging technologies that are coming in the pipeline that will need to be evaluated, and we're not sure whether NICE methods are suitable for the evaluation of such technologies, things like multi-indication diagnostics, the new disease-modifying dementia treatments, for example. So we started with a number of topics, and one of the topics that the HTA lab looked at also included AI, so the use of AI in economic evaluations and economic modeling was one of the projects for the HTA lab. So its use was really to ensure that the organization is future-proof when it comes to its methods that will be used for the evaluation of complex technologies.
Has an organization like NICE or another HTA body that is moving into the use of AI, have these organizations sufficiently defined failure in these pilots?
Good question. So I think the metric about failure is really not to have an added value compared to the current standard methods of that we are using. As I mentioned, the key issue is really, does it add value compared to standard method that we are all familiar with and we are very well prepared for using or assessing? This would be one key parameter of, I'd say, success, that there is additional value in terms of both time saving or improvement of outputs without the need, for example, to spend more resources and time efforts in the QA stage. So you are just simply shifting focus of your effort from one area to another. So that would be one of the success factors, I would imagine. Others would probably be the speed of access, timeliness of the advice, that they are able to completing the process of evaluation of the submitted evidence in a timely manner to allow for patient access. So really improving the ability to produce the same quality or even better quality of assessment, and reducing the time required to reach that point where patients can access the new treatment. So let's not forget, it's really about the end goal of patient access.
I get that, but let me challenge you and say, let's assume that an AI tool did add value. It did do it more efficiently. It did do it less costly, but it was slightly less accurate. And the accuracy differential was deemed unimportant to the decision process. The decision would still be the same, even though the two outputs were slightly different. How's HTA going to deal with that? I mean, is it their job to think about efficiency from and place that at a higher or a lesser value than accuracy? That's a tough one.
It is a balance, and I would say usually that would take where a risk-based approach would be very important. And as you said, considering where that which part or which stage or which point in the process is AI being used, and what are the consequences of the wrong decision, if that's even a potential. So it's a tough one. I'll leave it to HTA agencies to grapple with, to be honest, this one.
Dalia, I know you were involved with ELEVATE-GenAI, and ELEVATE-GenAI introduced reporting standards for AI and HEOR. Was the goal predominantly guardrails, acceleration, or improving quality?
I would say primarily to be guardrails due to the critical concerns around transparency, reproducibility, and trustworthiness of AI, especially at the early stages when we started experimenting with it first, but also improving quality. And this can be done by supporting reproducible reporting and peer review. So the ELEVATE-GenAI framework and checklist as well provide practical domain-specific tool for systematically reporting the use of large language models in HEOR. And it emphasizes 10 domains, including transparency, accuracy, and reproducibility. And that really I see as very helpful. At the stage it was published, we were in the very early stages of actually seeing any use cases published about the use of AI or Gen AI specifically in HEOR. So I think it had helped over the last, let's say, a year or so. It has helped people think about the reporting, and that in its own feeds back into improving the quality of studies.
And were there specific misconceptions you were trying to fix with ELEVATE-GenAI?
I wouldn't say misconceptions, but rather than fixing misconceptions, it was about breaking down the process of reporting. A study that used GenAI to achieve the required transparency. So having the ability to report all the required information that makes AI transparent, the use of AI transparent and reproducible. This was the key, I'd say, output or aim that we could achieve.
Let's move to our rapid fire, shall we?
Okay.
All right, Dalia, I hope that we get to have this conversation in 5 years because you're such a delight to interview. If we do, what conversation are we going to be having in 5 years?
5 years from now, maybe thinking about the role of robots in the process.
Okay, tell me more.
So even, I mean, like we are seeing the process or the AI is being trialed in different ways at the moment, and it's increasing in complexity from single models to agentic AI and multiple agents that can work with less involvement from the human elements. And as I said, I'm not a data scientist, but I expect that even areas that we have never thought before is possible would be possible in the near future. And one of them is having robots even involved in the process, replicating committee meetings perhaps, and reaching an automated decisions using, which might be happening as we speak, but I'm not really familiar with that concept happening. So let's see if we will ever get robots working for us.
Yeah. Can there ever be robots that are the market access professionals presenting data to payers, let's say in the United States, or even have them having that formulary good conversation? Are you going to be having them interacting directly with the medical director?
I feel like that is a possibility, and
Yeah.
that's probably where one of the areas where these types of robot systems could be deployed.
Yeah. We often think that artificial intelligence would have the highest chance to displace jobs that have lesser creativity in them. You said as much earlier today. However, a market access professional's job in translating and sharing evidence with a payer is based predominantly on dialogue, questions and responses that personalize the data to that target customer. However, if you have a robot that has a much greater aptitude for understanding that data, translating it in a way that was meaningful for the payer compared with the human, that seems like that would be a highly creative job that could be better or more efficiently done by a robot.
Yeah.
You know?
So definitely this is an area where you can think of the human AI system, if you like, or collaboration performing much better than either of them on its own.
True.
And I think that would mean that it's actually will never be either of them on its own in the future. It will be definitely the system that is human and AI augmented.
Yeah. So I think the reason I wanted to ask that question and hear your answer is for us not to get complacent as an industry and think that only heavily data heavy types of jobs may be at risk. You know, that even jobs that are customer facing
Absolutely.
could also be ones that really need to scale up their capabilities with respect to AI and data analysis.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Yeah. All right. What's the biggest opportunity? This is a short answer. What's the biggest opportunity in AI and HTA that you think we're not paying enough attention to?
Ooh. I wouldn't say we're not paying attention to, but we don't know much about yet, or how they are influencing the process of drug development. I suppose the very early stages of discovery, but also the very advanced stages of using AI in clinical trials and in areas where that both the speed and accuracy and the use of AI in enriching clinical trial data. These are areas that we haven't talked about that much, but really there is a huge potential there.
Tell me, who is a mentor or a person in our field and outside our field that has influenced you?
Okay, so in our field,
Mhm.
Professor Nance Devlin is my real mentor and role model, really, that I aspire to be following in her footsteps, and really that both on the professional level, as an academic and as an editor, and also on the personal level. And she's really offered me career changing advice, and have been a huge help along the way, and still is. So I would definitely say thank you to Nancy for being such an amazing mentor.
Shout out to Dr. Nancy Devlin and all the other mentors that give their time so generously to help improve our field. Being a mentor and a mentee is something we all should strive to do, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what about someone outside of the field that has influenced how you show up in life?
Wow, this is a difficult one, and while people would think of big names in life as it's, for me, it was a really a football player who is who's given me that feeling that you can, if you think about something and give much effort in, or put much effort into it, you will achieve, and you will reach your potential and your goals. And that's I'm not sure if you know him or not, Mohamed Salah. He's an Egyptian football player here in the UK in the Premier League, and he's really shown us how you can invest your time, effort, you give it all what you can, and you will really achieve. And how being a human, as well as being a celebrity, if you like, or a big achiever, they can be both together, l- giving you the best opportunity to succeed.
Mhm. If you weren't doing this work, Dahlia, what do you think you'd be doing?
So I've never thought I would be doing this work, and I always, in my younger years, thought about working in media and in broadcasting. So here you go, I can take your job, maybe, in this interview.
I think you
It's
absolutely could
science,
take
is
my job.
communication, media and communication was my dream, really.
Yeah. Well, I wish you luck on that journey. I think you've got a fine start.
Oh, who knows?
Uh, you obviously have a very strong aptitude for communication. And I think you also seem to have an aptitude for communicating complex ideas. How are you using this in your day-to-day work? How are you leaning on your special capability to try to make as much of an impact as possible?
So really, I believe that I've used, or really employed, that ability in terms of communicating complex ideas, breaking them down. I've tried to use them in talking about our work, especially it's very specialized sometimes, and health economics can feel like complicated and complex concepts that you need to convey in our role. I think I try to ensure that the level I'm communicating at is suitable for the audience, and certainly got feedback on that. That was really encouraging. So when I would present the basics of health economics to a clinician audience that have been really very skeptical about why are we including health economics, for example, in clinical guideline development. And I got that compliment that from the clinicians at the end of the presentation, that this is the best way health economics has been explained to us. So, I mean, it's really about trying to invest in or to utilize these skills in terms in my day-to-day working. Being able to communicate about it on social media have been successful to some extent. So I think I'm using these skills as we speak, really, every day, communicating about the work that we do, communicating about the outputs and the learnings from it. So I'm hoping that I'm doing it well enough, at least for the younger professionals in our field, to learn from it or to really find it in a more digestible way.
Mm-hmm. This is such a limitation of so many of the individuals in our field, or the communication capabilities. Do you think that there is a need for our associations to address this limitation and need? And if so, what would that look like?
I think there are opportunities, huge opportunities, because of the organizations such as ISPO that brings us together and try to support personal and professional development in the field. So we need to really believe that good communication is not a nice to have, but it's a must to have. And communicating about our work is key to reaching out to our target audience and to make the case of our value and the value of HEOR as a discipline for decision making and for access to health technologies. So it's important to start first by ensuring that we consider this as a key building block of our tool, of the tool in the toolkit that we have to practice as professionals.
What's one belief that you hold about AI in healthcare that not everyone agrees with?
The fact that AI is not gonna take our jobs. So this is what I believe, but I think many people believe that it will. I really believe that as they say, that people who know AI will replace people who don't know AI. This is really the direction that I see the AI is going in our field, but not many people believe that, and many really are fearful of the fact that we will be losing our jobs to AI.
Indeed. Well, Dalia, I want to thank you so much for this interview today. It's been illuminating and it's been delivered with great clarity. And I really feel like it's advanced many of our understanding of the use of AI in the HTA process. Thank you for the time today.
Thank you so much, Patty.